Well, good morning, my dear friends. I'm in the cellar of serenity and not the shed of serenity because I need a few things near to me to tell this story. And the story is about the great Basil Rathbone, the actor. Everyone thought he was English, but he was born in South Africa, but he was educated in England. And about his films and his personification of Sherlock Holmes in the 1940s, mostly in film but also in radio. Now I'm sporting a lot of accoutrement here to do with Sherlock Holmes, so I made a little clip and we'll show that to you now. Good morning, YouTube and YTPC. Beautiful day here in Switzerland, very frosty though. Well, as part of today's video, I am paying homage to Basil Rathbone, which was best known, of course, for his roles of Sherlock Holmes in the roughly the 1940s. So I'm going to talk a lot more about these things, but I just wanted to show you my collection and accoutrement, pursuing that idea of Tobacciana, and I'm very pleased that one or two at YTPCers are showing what they have in their collection, because I think it's quite fascinating. So, of course, I've one of the first tins I ever got, which I've mentioned this before, is the Sherlock Holmes Peterson tobacco. It's always good to have your sword stick around because you can use it, amongst other things, as a pointer. And that belongs to, and this one wasn't spoiled by warning labels and all of that, which is great. And recently I got this fantastic Sherlock Holmes lighter, and it's a Zippo, a real Zippo, and it's only about $20 on smokingpipes.com. Get yourself one of these. You won't get a better deal on a Zippo anywhere. And of course it's, as you would expect, a pipe lighter. And it's still, I filled this up 2 weeks ago and it's still going. I put a grommet in it and the bacon organic cotton, of course, filling, but still just about going, which is marvellous. And this is the one I put that commemorial 50p coin on, to make it a bit more Sherlock Holmesy. It does a nice job there. Anyway, you've seen that before, of course, and I've invested in this fantastic Basil Rathbone Peterson Sherlock Holmes pipe, which is just exquisite, I think, and I've smoked it a few times and it's absolutely a super smoker. This is 9mm with this beautiful silver band here, of course, with Sherlock on it, but that's silver, sterling silver, as marked with the hallmark. And this one was either mispriced at like $85 or $90 or something like that, because the one side is a kind of like a sandblast, And somebody sort of forgot on the other side it's more like a rustication, but it doesn't bother me at all. It looks beautiful. And this is one of the few pipes that I've actually ordered another one. And I do that very rarely to have a duplicate, but I would like one of these in my other place in southern Switzerland, so I decided to go for it, and I got the full sandblast one. It hasn't arrived yet, but probably at the end of this week it might do. Let's see. But absolutely exquisite, and of course it's a P-lip, and I do find they help a little bit also with tongue bite and everything. So and a lovely big bowl as well. So I will be smoking that shortly with you. So what else do I have? Just on Etsy I found someone that offers these lovely Sherlock key rings, which don't cost that much, and you can actually get them as lapel pins as well, which is really great. All of these things will have links below if you want to get something. This particular lapel pin I got from the Sherlock Holmes Museum in London. There's a link for that below, and if you're ever in London you've got to go there, and also the Charles Dickens Museum. They are sort of a must on your tour at some point. And everybody knows, of course, the good old Peterson Sherlock Holmes tamper. Larry Blackett has got one as well. I'm going to get one of those. But this is a lovely tamper as well. Just watch out for the pipe, because if you're not careful that can get broken off. But this is a beautiful pipe. Now, one of the highlights of my collection is very recent. This is from Etsy, and this is from Peakdale Sculptures, and this was a brass bust of Sherlock Holmes, but he offered to also paint it, and he showed an example, and I thought that was so exquisitely done that that's the model I bought. So it's a brass bust, but it's painted, and this man is a superb artist. This is absolutely exquisitely done, and so realistic, and so very similar to Basil Rathbone. I'm really delighted with it, and so that's something that will go in my little pipe alcove, and will remind me of the good old Sherlock. Now, additionally, you remember there was a book offered in smokingpipes.com, and I will have a link about their Sherlock Holmes story, which they published, and smokingpipes.com does lovely stories about celebrities in the tobacco world. Of course, here is a fictional one from Arthur Conan Doyle, but nevertheless he's become so legendary you could almost not imagine that he didn't exist. And this book I will refer to in the next part of the video, because it's got a lot of very good things, and it's mainly about what he smoked and the pipes and tobacco and around that, but referring to various films and what books were written about Sherlock Holmes or Conan Doyle, the original author. So we will come to that as well. Anyway, I just wanted to show it all together here, and what I'm doing these days is just printing out the photo and putting it on cardboard. It's a lot cheaper than buying aluminium plaques. So that will go in the cellar next to Albert Einstein. Talk to you in just a few seconds. So that's the collection so far, but as I said, there's a few things I'd like to add to it. I've got my Sherlock Holmes bow tie. And I'm playing some sleuth music, which is copyright free, and I will be doing a video about copyright free music that is getting much better for creators, and what you can find out there. And I'm having a glass of gin and tonic, because one of the drinks that Holmes liked was gin. He was also very expert about wine and port wine and sherry and whatever, but this was mentioned once or twice. And the gin I'm actually enjoying is this new British one, which is called Mom and God Save the Gin. So I'm drinking it in a Cumberland crystal glass, which was gifted to me by my mother. Here's to you, Mother. Good health. She's 90 years old and still going strong. Lovely. And of course I'm using my Sherlock Holmes lighter. Still going strong after 2 weeks. Now you could easily make a 10-hour video about Basil Rathbone, but I will just, for this first part, focus on him. Got a lot of notes, so he was born in South Africa in 1892, so it's a long time ago. Died in 1967 at the age of 75 in New York City, so he loved America and made most of his life there, although he was educated in the UK. And he did about 70 films in his career, but he did some television and did a lot of radio and a huge amount of stage acting in Broadway and the West End in London. A tremendously prolific actor with all his wonderful work, and he was in some silent films at the very beginning. I'll start with 1938 with the adventure films that he did, and he was very much known as the bad guy, Guy of Gisborne, battling with Errol Flynn. So the Adventures of Robin Hood with Errol Flynn, which is a fantastic and superb film, and the retouched, digitalized, colorized version of that is magnificent. Watch it. It's Errol Flynn in his prime, and has one of the most fantastic sword fights that you will ever see. I'll come to a second one which is about on the same level of that. And the reason is that it was so fantastic is that Basil Rathbone was an expert fencer, and he taught Errol Flynn, and he taught Tyrone Power in the second example I will come to. So you might remember that fantastic film, but do revisit it. It's an absolute classic. So in his early career he was doing these swashbucklers and some horror films, and then he came to 1939 up to 1946 where he was doing the series of Sherlock Holmes films. And if you look at Basil Rathbone, he fits the description of Conan Doyle. This is what Conan Doyle described him as: taller than average, a bit thin and lanky, angular face, pointed nose and chin, receding hairline, grey piercing eyes, which he had indeed, and sideburns. If you look at him in this photo here in the role of Guy of Gisborne, look at that guy. He looks magnificent and as baddies come. Absolutely fantastic. So, you know, it fits, and in the role of Sherlock Holmes, he also fits magnificently. Now, many great actors have done a fantastic, brilliant job. You know, Cumberbatch, Roger Moore did it, the great Peter Cushing, and many others have portrayed Sherlock Holmes, and Jeremy Brett, and so on. And I agree, they're also brilliant. But the first one who does it quintessentially and is successful on film is still the first one, and he's still quintessential. Just like Lugosi did Dracula the first time, and I'm sorry, he's still the king of all of them. And for me, just my personal opinion, Rathbone personifies Sherlock Holmes. Well, actually, an interesting thing is one of his less common TV appearances was with William Shatner in the play about Billy Budd. Here's a picture here of the two of them, and if you look on the left, Patrick Macnee, John Steed was also in that production. And Shatner was incredibly young there, of course, and the great Basil Rathbone was a big star in that production, and it's actually worth watching. Shatner has done lots of humorous stories about what sort of went wrong on that Canadian production, but still, that's a fateful piece of history, you know, about young stars meeting old stars there, also in the case of Patrick Macnee. Well, actually, I found out an interesting piece that one of the first plays that Rathbone was in the UK on the stage was at the Theatre Royal in Ipswich. Well, Ipswich is my corner of the UK from my origin. 1911, slightly before my mortal time, but did actually almost bump into Rathbone in 1934 when I went to Wilkie's to get some tobacco. It was his blend, the Wilkie 515, and I got it and left. And who did I see coming up the street? Basil Rathbone, as a young actor before he'd actually reached his fame. Quite extraordinary. Anyway, in the wartime, Rathbone was actually he was decorated. He got the Military Cross, and he did some pretty risky stuff as an intelligence officer. And he was one of those guys that got out the trench and had to go and spy on what the Germans were doing on the other side of the trenches, and dressed up as a tree, you know. But apparently it sort of worked, and he actually got away with 3 or 4 missions like that, and actually brought very good information back, and for which he was decorated. I think he is probably the James Bond that should have been but never came. No disrespect to my hero here, Sean Connery, which is the best ever. Many others have done James Bond brilliantly, but with his war experience and his appearance again is very much like Ian Fleming described Bond, and a little bit with the height and gaunt visage like Ian Fleming. So it would have been a fascinating thing if Rathbone had maybe taken on that role even before Sean came to it in the 1960s. Well, I mentioned that Rathbone was an expert fencer, and he taught Errol Flynn and also Tyrone Power. Let's have a look at these photos. You see this, and now if you want to see maybe also the best sword fight ever in celluloid on film, I have to say both of these sword fights with Errol Flynn and also Tyrone Power were brilliant. I tend towards the one with Tyrone Power, and there's a link below to look at that sword fight. You tell me if that's not the best you've ever seen. It's absolutely brilliant. Now Rathbone, of course, was scripted to lose those as the bad guy, but as the teacher I'm sure he could have won both of them, but they are perfect. I've done some fencing, was never really particularly good that I could win medals or anything like that, but I can at least appreciate the skill that he brought to those actually legendary scenes in film now. In fact, when he started in silent films in the 1920s up to the early sound films, he actually played a character called Philo Vane in 1930. A film was called The Bishop Murder Case. So that actually gave him an intro and a sort of kind of training and preparation to become Sherlock Holmes as a detective in that early film. It's interesting, the facts, when you start to research something in a little bit more depth, what you find. Now, one of the quintessential films of the quintessential Sherlock Holmes was The Hound of the Baskervilles. And you've all been asking yourself, what has he got in the pipe? Well, I've smoked Sherlock Holmes, and I've talked about that in earlier videos. And there is, of course, 221 Baker Street from Dunhill, which I don't have any more of, unfortunately. But in tribute to the Hound of the Baskervilles, I decided to smoke Barking Dog from Sutcliffe. And you get this in bulk, and it's called RL-BD. RL, I think, is from the blender, and BD is Barking Dog. And that's a copy of the old Philip Morris a match, and it gets very good scores. And Jim Inks said this is actually probably better than the original, more flavour. Now, why did I pick that especially? Not only The Hound of the Baskervilles, this film, you must watch it. The redigitalized version in colour with Peter Cushing is brilliant, and also the original, of course, with Basil Rathbone is quintessential. So black and white, but you've got to watch them. So Barking Dog is a rum blend, and he liked rum blends. As you know, the Wilkie 515 is his classic own Wish blend that he bought in the 30s. So the rum cake of Wilkie is very close to that. That was given out in 1996 from Wilkie as a Christmas tobacco, but it's pretty close to the 515 if you can't get that one. And it's Jamaica rum, so they put some decent rum in it and you can taste the rum. It's very, very good. So the Barking Dog gets 3.3 in tobacco reviews. It's a cube cut, which I like because they smoke a bit slower, maybe a few more relights, but they smoke slow and cool. It's Burley Latakia. Latakia is going to give it a smoky touch to the sweetness from the rum and the Virginia, and will also even out a bit the nick and keep it a cooler smoke. And I had a couple of bowls yesterday. I thought, this is stuff this is 3.5 on the scale of tobacco reviews. This one is, I'm glad I got a big 8-ounce quantity because it's absolutely superb and I loved it from the first puff. So that the Hound of the Baskervilles was 1939, and Nigel Bruce was his sidekick as Watson, and also kind of a very quintessential type of Watson that always nuances of that came in later performances. If I think James Mason played Watson to Christopher Plummer's Sherlock Holmes, there was a little bit the same kind of play between them. But of course the career of an actor is not easy, and you're doomed by your success often, as was a little bit Basil Rathbone typecast, just like Bela Lugosi, or even much later William Shatner. Everyone said, how can you cast an iconic person when everyone says, well, you know, that's look, Dracula's in this film, or look, Sherlock is in this film, or Captain Kirk is in this film, when they see that actor. So it's really tricky. Fortunately, he had his stage reputation, being able to play a great many roles, and also Shakespearean roles, so he kept on with that. He did a few comedy films which he did extremely well, and showed he could also do that with Bob Hope and Danny Kaye in the 50s. He actually got a Tony Award in 1948, so, and he also of course is in the Walk of Fame in Hollywood. You will find his place amongst all the other legendary stars. His last film was in 1968, which was a bit of a low budget one, so, you know, in terms of the film history, it was really tapered off at that point. But he also did a lot of radio very brilliantly, and he did a lot of narration of novels. For example, Night Before Christmas from Clemency Moore, or Edgar Allan Poe stories, Strange Tales. He had the marvellous voice, and a stage-trained actor with that baritone voice, and, you know, you can always find work of some kind or another. He was actually married a long time. His second marriage was a very long one, all to the point of his death. Ouida Bergère, who was a screenwriter and an actress herself, had actually quite a reputation for outrageous parties of great scale, so it probably was not easy for him to save his money with a partner like that. But they, in Hollywood in the 40s, they were quite, in the 50s, they were quite famous. I must go to one of those parties and meet him. Now, talking of detective work, a couple of videos ago I found a strange plant in the woods. You remember that? And I said I must find out what it is. And one of my subscribers actually tipped the right solution to it. That plant was Helleborus foetidus. And this plant, you remember that? And to my disappointment, that is not a nice plant. Its other names are bear's foot or dungwort. And apparently, if you crush the leaves, it stinks quite badly, and it's poisonous. It's got glycosides of a weird kind, which if you ingest anything, get it on your fingers and then eat a sandwich, you might have vomiting and delirium. But apparently it loves woodlands in chalky regions, which is what we have, and it does bloom in late winter. And that mystery is solved, and I think Sherlock, in a very modest way, would be pleased to know we did our detective work. Cheers again. Now, on that table, I showed you a book, didn't I? This book. Now, this book talks about the kind of pipes that Sherlock smoked, and many other things. So it was offered on smokingpipes.com, and if they still have it, I think if you're a Sherlock fan, get it. And it talks about all the pipes. There's Roger Moore with the calabash, but this Peterson 4AB is the one that's kind of the model of this. This one is, of course, an army mount, but the shape is quite similar. And I actually like this one with the silver band and the P-lip and the filter. Perfect. So in the novels there's less to go on in terms of the pipe, but of course from the films, and there's Basil Rathbone with that exact Peterson 4AB. So helps you to make the link why Peterson came up with that. And what about the tobacco? Well, it was mentioned that he liked black shag, and Arcadia was one that Watson liked, and they shared sometimes. And McClellan did a great series of 3 tobaccos, I think back in the 90s, and I totally missed this era, and here they are. And you see black shag down there. Now I looked it up. That McClellan's black shag actually didn't do that well in tobacco reviews. Some thought it was a bit lackluster for what they paid. Anyone who has got deep pockets and filthy rich and thinks $100 is not much, there's 1 tin left in 4 noggins. It's too rich for my blood, but for $100, I think $99, you can have it. And that's the last tin I saw of this black shag that's around. The tobacco that most of us know, of course, is the tin I showed, which is the Peterson's Sherlock Holmes, and that's still around and you can still buy it, and it's pretty good. I actually like this barking dog a little bit more. Very easy, and won't bite you even if you try. And it's one I'm looking at that jar thinking, is that jar big enough? Shouldn't I get some more? But you know, my handbrake is firmly on with new tobaccos, because that there is 10 times bigger than what you're seeing in this screen, so you know, it would be a bit crazy. And oh, I haven't shown you, I'm now going to expose you to my belt, and that salamander is a story for Sherlock Holmes, but that's the subject of another video. And of course I've got a pocket watch here, which is the one he would definitely in those days would have had a pocket watch. You've seen this actually before, which when I was stationed in Russia, good old Dmitri gave me that after he tried to kill me and failed, which is jolly sporting, I think, of him. And I gave him, of course, a very nice English pipe for him to smoke. It's only a fair thing to do, isn't it? Well, it was great fun. You all look after yourselves out there and take care, and get yourself some Basil Rathbone. His films and his radio broadcasts and the pipe and some barking dog as well. Take care everyone. Cheers, bye bye.